let's go over some blankety rules, especially there were a few of you who were missing in this exercise the first time we did it. The inner circle has the only permission to speak during its time of its question. All right, the hot seat next to Andrew and Kelly there has a big X on it. Is allowed for the outer circle for someone to come in, say their piece, and go back out to be quiet again. All right, do not hog the hot seat. That's a big no-no. If you have post-it notes or notes you'd like to pass forward to the person who's communicating during this time, that is permissible. But the only thing as an outer circle person you should be focusing on is your evaluation of your partner and the discussion that's being taken place. Potentially this discussion in the center could help you with further discussions as you become the inner circle. Okay? Do I have any questions? All right, let's start with our first question. What word, phrase, or quote is the most important and why?
Okay, I said I can understand why they take your shoelaces and belt from you when you're in jail. That was on page 203. I have myself on here. And I just kind of said this because like it really shows that like Steve is like becoming like suicidal and he's really becoming like, he really does not like this, and like the whole trial and like this murder and like Mr. Nesbitt's death and everything is just like eating him up alive. And like on page 59 it does say they take away your belt so you can't kill yourself no matter what. But then on page 203 he like is saying he wants his belt and shoelaces so that way he can kill himself. And on page 45 it says, I hate this place so much. All they talk about is hurting people. And then on page 46 it says, I hate this place. And so Steve obviously has a really strong anger towards prison. And I feel like this is the most important because like it really shows like how big this trial is in his life and how like it's like consuming him.
Well, I think you got a good point, but I thought the most important quote was on page 4 and 5 when he said, I'll write it down in the notebook they let me keep. I'll call it what the lady who called me a monster. And I thought this was most important because Steve struggles a lot in jail, and just the mental and the reality part, you know? And constantly he's writing down the word monster over and over and over again. And he's just doubting himself. And when his dad came in, his dad even broke down. It's like no one believes him anymore that he was innocent. And I thought that took a big factor in this.
Yeah, I totally like agree with you that like I feel like the most important quotes in this will have to deal with like him just like being torn apart and stuff. And like I use the prison poetry because it's like it says like it gives people a purpose, and I don't really in prison, and I don't feel like he knows what his purpose is, and he like has his purpose, you know. And so yeah, I agree with you.
On page 13, like Steve says or asks Miss O'Ryan, he says, "Do you think we'll win?" And I said, this is like really important because that's the question of the whole book. Like it's what keeps people reading. Is like everyone's wondering, are they gonna win? Like is Steve innocent? Is he guilty? Like it's what keeps everyone like it's what keeps them going. So I think it's like really important. And like they asked them that like early on. Like they said that question on page 13, which it says that the author really wanted everyone to know that like this is the main question of the book. Like are they gonna win? Are they not? So I thought that's really important.
I agree with you, and I think although I think another question is how is Steve feeling? Because I mean half of our book was the trial and half of it was his journal entries, and so I feel like in the like trial part that is definitely the most.
Well, I thought he had different like emotions during the book, you know, like sometimes he was just like, you know, it was saying he had to cry at night. That's the only time you could cry at night, because if you cried during day, it would look like you're weak, you know.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost like two different books going on. Like there's Steve in prison and his like thoughts and that's his journal entries, but then there's the movie script and that's the trial, that's all the business part. And so I feel like the most important word, phrase, or question should come from either of those because like it's, yeah.
There's more than one answer for this.
Well, I thought it was on page 24 when O'Brien said you have to believe in yourself if we're going to convince the jury of your innocence. Because on page 45 he says how much he hates it, and then he believes that he's a monster in the beginning of the book. Then she crosses it out, and it just makes him think a whole different way about the trial.
Like when you said the innocence, that's what my main one I thought it was because that's what the whole outcome of the trial is, and that's what the whole point of the book is, and to prove that Steve's innocent and didn't do it.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say, going along with what Colin said about the monster thing, like, they really obviously wanted you to, like, he wanted you to know that Steve was called monster, like, it's the title. It was said on page 4 and 5, which is really early on, and then they bring it up again on page 24. So, I think that Walter D. Myers, he just, like, really wanted you to know that Steve is, like, hurting inside, and people are, like, what people are thinking of him, and he's, like, struggling in prison.
I feel like
I agree with Kirsten though, because like with the innocence, because I mean that can go and like that is like what he thought, but at the same time like that's what he was like tried, like that's what his verdict was.
Okay, I think the most important word in the book is nightmare, and this word I found more than once in the book, like on page 96. I think this is the most important because his entire life, like right now, is nightmare. Like the whole case going on and how he was in prison and all the bad things that were happening to him, and the people accusing him, his dad saying he didn't know who he was, and people calling him names like monster.
But going back to what Kirsten said, is the theme innocence or is it monster? Because Colin said that the most important word was monster because, and Olivia said that Walter D. Myers obviously wanted you to know that he was called monster. And I feel like he said it so many times because he had nothing left to believe. And then he thought that then he had to believe that he was innocent if he was going to convince.
I feel also that like Steve's almost like torn in this. I feel like that's why we're torn, is because Steve is torn. Am I innocent? Should I believe in myself? Or am I a monster? Who am I even? You know, like I feel like a lot in the book it was who am I? Like all this, and so I feel like he thinks that he's innocent sometimes and he thinks that he's a monster someday. Like I think that's kind of why we're
I feel like he has
torn.
mixed emotions too.
Yeah, like I feel like it all depends on like the day, like you wake up and you're, or if like something happened in the trial and that like made him be like, I got this one in the bag, you know, like, but then if something else happened in the trial, he'd be like, I'm a monster. Like,
Because, like, in different parts of the case, he's like, oh, I actually did do this. Somebody was killed. Now I feel guilty and somebody has to pay for it. And it should be me. But then he's like, I wasn't even near the store. Like,
yeah.
Do you think that he would kill himself if he actually got a chance to, like what you said?
I think so, because I mean, like he said, I can understand why they take your shoelaces and belt from you when you're in jail. Like that obviously shows that he wants to kill himself. But at least that's one of his days.
I feel like it depends on the day because, like, it definitely would cross his mind because I feel like that crossed everybody's mind that's been in prison. But the matter of if you're actually going to commit suicide or just thinking about it.
Yeah, but I don't think he did it right because he didn't feel bad about himself, like he kind of did. But I think the most reason he does is because he's scared of the whole thing that's going on, and he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Well, yeah, but like what Olivia and Colin said, he himself, the book title, all of it, it is basically revolved around that one word, monster. You see it in pages 5, 7, 8, 24, 61. That's just through 5 through 8. There's at least one every 20 or so pages with the word monster.
But I think that there's also several like other words that like innocent and like I just feel like monster is a huge part. Like that's like the title of his movie, but
It's not the name.
no, but like the name of the book. But like, is he a monster? Like, does he believe this? Like, I feel like they're just because it's like the title of the book and just because that's what like started it all and like that's what Patrick Kelly called him. I don't really feel like that's the
Well, doesn't he talk about, like, I remember reading a page where he was talking about how his life's gonna be over, you know, by the time he gets out, if he was found guilty, where he thought he was gonna be like, I don't know, wasn't it 30 years or something, he would have to wait, it was gonna be a long time, so he's gonna be, his older age is miss his whole life. So I guess, you know, like what you said, they had to take away like his belt and his shoelaces and all that, so he didn't kill himself, because I think he would, because his life is basically over.
I think that, like, I feel like I'm sorry. I feel like he understands it, but I feel like he's not going to. But I feel like if he was if his verdict was guilty, then he would attempt it to.
What isn't the penalty death though, anyways?
Well, that's what they were trying for, but that's not necessarily the penalty.
Well, referring back to him maybe thinking about committing suicide, well, that's why he's creating the movie script, because if he would have committed suicide, then monster, or the most important word of the text, wouldn't have happened, because he would be dead. The story would be over. Simple as that. So,
Well, like, there is this one part of the book, page 99. If you give up, then they will give up on you. That's what Brian, that's what that's, sorry. It's a quote in the book, and if you think about it, he slowly progresses more towards suicide. I think it really builds onto it.
I think it's because, well, the part that's eating him alive is the fact that, like, people are making him feel this way, and the fact that, like, back at, like, in the town, people are just probably looking at the news, like on 117, how there was those two women, and they're, like, talking about what happened, and I feel like the part, he just keeps thinking in his head, like, back in the, in town, people are probably just seeing that, and they're like, oh, what a horrible kid, and just going on with their lives. But because they're not really going into it and what happened and what kind of person he was, I think that's killing him, that people just like see it and they're like, oh wow, that person, like, that's horrible, they would like murder someone, but they don't really know that.
Yeah, like what you said about how monster was, I feel like he only keeps repeating it because he has nothing left to believe in himself.
Yeah.
Like, he thinks that he is a monster and that he deserves to go to jail, but at the same time he doesn't want to, and he has nothing left to believe in himself to say that he's still innocent.
Well, early on, didn't they try to mess with his head, Preston
Yeah.
Kelly or whatever?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
so he would think that during the whole book.
Yeah.
That's why she called him monster.
And I mean, I feel like, again, going back to like him being like tied, like, who is he? Like, cause, he is just kind of torn, and I feel like he almost like just repeats monster because like that is all that he has left to believe in, like this whole innocence thing. Nothing is really like going for him because like I feel like he was kind of fishy about it because O'Brien even like believe in me, and so like if Petrocelli strongly believes that Steve is a monster and O'Brien only like half believes that Steve is innocent, then he's probably gonna go with like Petrocelli, like, I'm a monster.
Yeah, because that's the only like strong base of something that he has to believe in. Because like what you were saying, those ladies, they think, oh, that person's a monster, and then Petrocelli calls him a monster, and then he doesn't really know how Brian feels, and then his parents don't come and visit him. So
Well, like, at the end of the book, when he goes to hug her, she turns away. When I read that, I kind of thought that she even thought he was guilty. She did not feel good letting a murderer, or even a part of a murder, get away.
Let's hear from here, and then we're gonna switch
Um,
questions.
So you guys are saying that monster is the most important word, but that's the same thing with cross over dribble. It's like cross over dribble wasn't the most important part of that book. It was like his determination to keep going. I think it's just kind of like what he believes in himself, and so I mean I feel like we're all like torn because Steve is torn, but at the same time like he's slowly like going down like this monster. I'm guilty, like I deserve like the death penalty, like that. So
I don't think there's one word that it's not decided with either. Like Kelly said, there's two books in one, so there's two things going on pretty much. So how can you find? I think it's hard to find one word or quote that like in some of the entire book. So I think that everything pretty much the same is right because there's more than one story going on.
Very democratic of you. Okay, let's go ahead and have some wingman time and switch to question 2.
Wingman.